Hello 102 students. This is an introduction to critical thinking. I'm sure many of you are under the impression that all thinking is in fact critical. And I'm here to tell you that that's not really the case. A lot of times, we just kind of go through our lives looking at the world around us, watching the news, reading the newspaper, and we process the information, we compartmentalize it, and we decide what we think about it, and we move on. And usually, by the way, it seems to go like this. This topic interests me, so I will watch it, I'll pay attention to it, maybe I'll develop an opinion. This topic does not, so who really cares? And in this class, we really kind of have to get out of that mindset, okay? Because it's not critical thinking when we have these gut reactions, okay? And a gut reaction is very, very simply what you first think of something. For instance, if I would say any kind of popular topic like gun control or abortion, I would bet that some kind of a word would come into your head, okay? And that is your gut reaction. And we really have to avoid that. Not that you can't absolutely have your own opinions on these things, but you have to be willing to examine them. All right? The other thing that really seems to be a problem is when students don't seem to care at all. It's that gut reaction to, doesn't matter to me, or doesn't apply to me, and then you turn away from a situation. And that's not necessarily a good thing either. Because the vast majority of the things that we encounter in the newspaper, on the news, they all impact us in one way or the other. It's super important for us to be a critical thinker. Think, well, why do I care? Why is it something that should matter to me? And try to apply and kind of put all the information that you're seeing and reading on a daily basis and incorporate it into, your knowledge base. So critical thinking, as I've said, is thinking carefully. It's being aware of what you believe or think about things. For instance, your belief on abortion. Why do you have it? What part of you supports that? Is it a moral issue? Is it an issue of freedom of choice? All of these things are things that you should consider when you're coming to that conclusion. It shouldn't simply be, no, I don't believe in abortion, or yes, I believe abortion is good. Okay, those are things that you can think, but it's also super important to understand why. And if you had to defend yourself, if you had to talk to someone that didn't agree with you, how would you defend your stance? How would you defend your opinion? This is what makes up critical thinking. Not only to know what your beliefs and opinions are, but also, be willing to think about how those beliefs and opinions stand up against what someone who thinks the opposite would say. So, will your belief or opinion hold water, or is there something that maybe you're not considering? And you see, it says on the slide there, be willing to incorporate new information. That is not to be closed-minded. Not to be closed-minded. And it's a really easy thing for me to write on that slide. However, it's a super, super hard thing for anyone, including myself, by the way, to implement. Because a lot of times we have beliefs and opinions that are really very difficult to change. They're very difficult to change. And so to try to stay open when you're considering new information sometimes is extremely difficult. So we've talked about what critical thinking is. Now, how do you do it? What can you do to think critically? First of all, when a topic is brought up, and I guarantee you, throughout the course of this semester, many different topics will be brought up. Topics you didn't even know you had an opinion on, or maybe you don't even want to have an opinion on, will be brought up. And the first thing I would ask is you be aware of what your gut reaction is. And this is what you think or feel as soon as you hear about a particular topic. All right? And we all have that. If we read an essay on a topic, you will immediately think, oh, this is about whatever. I believe that's a bad thing. And the topic that comes to mind, because it's easy to see, why the initial inclination would be that it's bad. If you read an essay on racial profiling, for instance, bells would probably go off in your head and you would say, hey, no, racial profiling, that's not good, that's bad. And so be aware of that. I mean, you may not spend 1 second of one day thinking about the police racial profiling, or you may well. But in this class, many different topics will be brought up, and you need to be aware of what it is you're thinking. After that, you need to think about why. Why is it your gut reaction? Why do you think racial profiling is a bad thing? Well, because it's bad, it's wrong to stereotype, right? That would be my gut reaction. As soon as I see racial profiling, I think, uh-oh, racial profiling is racist. And that's bad. And now, that's why I have the gut reaction that I have, okay? And so, this is kind of the process that you would go through. You have to examine not only why you think the way you do, but what supports that in your mind. For instance, the abortion example again. You may think, hey, abortion is murder. Then you take a step back and say, well, wait a minute. Why do I think it's murder? Well, I think it's murder because of this. Okay, so you need to be able to examine it. After you've determined what your stance is, be able to clearly state it. Okay? For instance, racial profiling is wrong because it promotes racism and provides inaccurate results. Because not every person of a race acts a certain way. So to say that racial profiling will help to pinpoint a criminal is really quite ridiculous. So again, you go through your thought process of not only what you think, but why you think it. And then to go further, you can list supporting points to back up your stance. And we just did this a little bit when I said, that not all people of a race act a certain way, and that it would be highly inaccurate to assume that they do. All right, and I would probably, if I was writing an essay against the racial stereotyping or racial profiling, I would probably want to get some sort of information, statistics, and all that good stuff that would prove that it's really not a valuable way to find a criminal. The last thing you would do is you would consider how people on the other side view your topic. Okay, you would consider how people on the other side view your topic, because that's very enlightening. All right, that's very enlightening to you. I mean, if you try to figure out why would someone be in favor of racial profiling, for instance, you would really kind of have to examine what reasons they would possibly come up with. And quite frankly, probably their chief reason would be that racial profiling is effective. And they may have all kinds of statistics, they may have all kinds of information. Now here's where it gets kind of tricky, okay? Because those statistics and those facts might in fact prove that racial profiling is in fact effective. I'm not saying they do, I'm not saying they do not, but proof could be used to really kind of totally refute or negate what you're coming up with. And this is what you'll be encountering in a lot of the essays we read. A lot of the essays we read are going to come up with things that you don't believe to be the case. Okay? And your goal will be to see how they try to change your mind and to see if they effectively do it or if there's a problem with their argument. You are going to be picking apart arguments. This is a very big part of thinking critically. All right, let me give you an example here, okay? And I'm going to give you an example from my own gut reaction. And we all have hot button topics. And in this class, we'll probably realize whose hot button topic is whose, okay? But gun control is something, when I hear it, bells go off in my head and I think, no, boo, bad, gun control is not a good idea. Okay, and my gut reaction is that gun control laws don't work. The only people they help are criminals. And I guess I would feel this way is because I just can't imagine in my mind someone that wanted to commit a crime with a gun stopping because there was a law that told them that they couldn't get a gun. because criminals by their nature don't follow laws, they break them. So if they want to get a gun, they will get a gun. We can make every law in the entire world, but they're still going to get guns. Now, that's just my gut reaction, okay, and I know that. So now I think about, well, why? Why am I so against gun control? And this is where you have to think about yourself. First of all, my dad is a policeman and he was a policeman for 30 years. I grew up in a family that firearms were present. Ever since I was a little girl, my dad would come in with his gun belt and he would put it, somewhere on top of the refrigerator or somewhere it couldn't be reached. And I knew that good guys carried guns. And that's how I view policemen, okay? Also, my military background. I've shot and I've fired all sorts of weapons. I have a handgun in my possession. And I feel that that would probably influence the way I feel about gun control laws. Also, my family members. My husband's a member of the NRA, so he certainly influences how I feel about gun control. He hates it when anything happens with a gun and it looks as though, it's going to rear up and people are going to start calling for gun control. This makes him very unhappy. So, I know all these things are influencing me. So, how can I verbalize my stance? Well, more gun control laws would be useless in reducing crime. That's what I think, very, very seriously. And my supporting point would largely be that a small percentage of crimes are committed by legal registered gun owners. Most guns used to commit crimes are obtained illegally, or at least not by the person that's meant to have them. Now, my opposition will say gun laws do stop some people from committing crimes. It's just a fact. If there were stricter laws, more crimes could be stopped. So, that would be something that I would have to address. And there would be all kinds of other opposition. And I've read all kinds of opposition where, we look at different countries overseas that do have gun laws and look how that affects them. All of these things have to be considered by me for me to continue to hold my opinion. If not, well, what do? I have to think about changing my mind. So what about you? When you start to write your essays, what can you do to make your audience believe that your stance is the correct one? Well, you've already seen videos on ethos, pathos, and logos, but let me briefly remind you about them. So the first one is ethos, and this is your relationship with the audience, proving to the audience that you're trustworthy and knowledgeable about the topic. Okay, you can do this by tone, you do this by use of sources, and you do it by past experience. Pathos, this is emotion. You connect with your audience emotionally about what you're about your topic. And finally, logos, logic. You use statistics. Your audience feels like it makes sense to agree with what you're saying. All right? So what I want you to take away from this is when you are thinking critically in this class, you are aware of what you are thinking. You're aware of what your gut reaction is. You examine your gut reaction and do your best to provide supporting points to back it up. And then you also hold that up against what you believe the opposition's point is. How will you do this in an essay? Well, you will very effectively do it referring to, as you see on the slide, the rhetorical triangle. And this is super important, okay? All of these things are used together to create a valid argument. Not only do I want you to use this to create your own valid argument, but I also want you to use it when you are analyzing the arguments you'll read in class. Do these authors have the rhetorical triangle in their essays? Okay, so this has been just a very brief summation of what I believe your role is as a critical thinker in this class. Thank you.